Let me tell you about a patient named Mary. Mary was 78 years old. She was diligent, she was disciplined. Every morning, she took her 3 blood pressure medications. Every afternoon, she wrote her numbers in a little logbook to show her cardiologist. Her numbers were what most doctors would call perfect, 115/75, a textbook reading. According to the guidelines, Mary was a success story. Her hypertension was controlled. But Mary didn't feel like a success. She felt dizzy every time she stood up from her armchair. She was forgetting the names of her grandchildren. She lacked the energy to cook. And one Tuesday, while walking to the bathroom, her knees buckled. She fell and fractured her wrist. When she came to the hospital, the doctors checked her pressure. It was low. But they didn't reduce her medication. They congratulated her on her heart health and sent her to orthopedics for the wrist. Mary was suffering from a condition that is becoming an epidemic in modern geriatrics. She was dying of therapeutic success. Her numbers were right for a 25-year-old athlete, but they were catastrophic for a 78-year-old grandmother. In this investigation, we are going to challenge the most sacred number in medicine, 120/80. We are going to explore why forcing a senior citizen's blood pressure down to normal levels might actually be starving their brain of oxygen, causing silent strokes, and accelerating dementia. We need to ask a dangerous question. Is high blood pressure in the elderly always a disease? Or is it sometimes a desperate attempt by the body to survive? To understand this, we have to go back to the origin of the number itself. Where did 120/80 come from? It did not come from God, and surprisingly, it did not originally come from doctors treating old people. It came from insurance actuaries in the 1940s and 50s. Insurance life companies analyzed millions of records to see who lived the longest. They found that young men, mostly in their 20s and 30s, lived longer if their pressure was below 120. So that became the gold standard. Medicine took this data and applied a one-size-fits-all logic. If 120 is good for a young man, it must be good for an old woman. If 120 is safe for flexible arteries, it must be safe for rigid arteries. For 50 years, we have been treating the human body like a machine that should never change. But the human body is not a static machine. It is an adaptive organism. Think about a river flowing through a canyon. If the canyon is wide and open, the water flows gently. But if you narrow the canyon with rocks and debris, what happens to the water? The pressure must increase to keep the same amount of water moving. If the pressure stayed low in the narrow canyon, the water would stop flowing. It would stagnate. Your arteries are that canyon. When you are 20, your aorta, the main pipe leaving your heart, is like a rubber balloon. It is elastic. It stretches with every beat. But as you age, you lose a protein called elastin. It gets replaced by collagen and eventually by calcium. Your arteries turn from rubber balloons into lead pipes. This is arteriosclerosis. This brings us to the core concept of adaptive physiology. When your arteries get stiff, your heart faces a physics problem. It needs to push blood up to your brain against gravity, but the pipes resist the flow. So what does your heart do? Does it give up? No, it pumps harder. It raises the pressure. It does this on purpose. It raises the systolic pressure, the top number, to 140, 150, 160, specifically to smash the blood through the stiff vessels and ensure it reaches the top of your head. Doctors see the 160 and say, "Oh no, that is a risk factor for a stroke. We must lower it." So they give a pill. The pump slows down, the pressure drops to 120. The doctor is happy. The chart looks green. But inside the patient's body, a crisis is beginning. The pressure is now too weak to overcome the stiffness. The blood flow slows down to a trickle. The heart is safe, but the brain is suffocating. This leads us to a terrifying statistical phenomenon known as the J-curve. If you look at a graph of mortality, yes, death rates go up when pressure is extremely high, like 180 or 200. That's the right side of the curve. But here's the secret. Death rates also skyrocket when the pressure gets too low in older adults. That's the left side of the J. We have spent billions of dollars focusing on the high side. We have ignored the low side, and millions of seniors like Mary are currently living in that low danger zone, feeling tired, foggy, and unsteady because their doctors are treating the number, not the physics of the plumbing. We need to stop thinking like accountants looking at a spreadsheet and start thinking like hydraulic engineers. We need to understand Ohm's law of fluid dynamics, because once you understand the relationship between pressure, flow, and resistance, you will realize that high blood pressure in an 80-year-old might actually be the only thing keeping them alive. Let's dive into the microscopic anatomy of your aorta and explain why stiff pipes require a sledgehammer approach from your heart.
Sledgehammer approach from your heart. To understand the mechanics of your own survival, you have to look at the wall of your arteries. When you are born, your aorta, the main highway carrying blood from the heart, is yellowish. It is packed with a rubber-like protein called elastin. Every time your heart beats, the aorta expands like a balloon to accept the blood and then gently snaps back to push it forward. This elasticity is what keeps your blood pressure low. But biological rubber has a shelf life. After about 600 million heartbeats, roughly age 50 or 60, the elastin fatigues. It breaks down. The body repairs these cracks not with new rubber, but with scar tissue, with stiff, white collagen, and eventually calcium deposits settle into the walls. Your arteries transform from flexible garden hoses into rigid lead pipes. This is not a disease you can catch. It is the inevitable wear and tear of time. Now we have to apply the laws of physics, specifically fluid dynamics. There is a fundamental equation that governs every plumbing system in the world, including your body. Flow equals pressure divided by resistance. Please focus on this for a second. Flow is the amount of blood reaching your brain cells. This is what keeps you alive and thinking. Resistance is how hard it is to push fluid through the pipes. Pressure is the force of the pump. Here is the trap of aging. Because your arteries are now rigid pipes, the resistance has skyrocketed. It is hard to move blood through a stiff tube. So, look at the equation. If resistance goes up, what must happen to pressure to keep the flow constant? The pressure must go up. It is a mathematical necessity. Your heart senses the resistance and instinctively pumps harder, raising your systolic pressure to 140 or 150, simply to maintain the same level of oxygen delivery to your brain. This is what we call essential hypertension. The word essential was used by old-school doctors because they believed the high pressure was essential to force blood through the hardened arteries. But modern medicine dropped the word essential and just calls it hypertension. We started treating it as an error to be corrected, rather than an adaptation to be respected. So, what happens when we intervene? Mary has stiff arteries, high resistance. Her heart is pumping at 150, high pressure, to maintain flow. We give her a beta blocker and a diuretic. We force the pump to weaken. We force the fluid volume down. Her pressure drops to 120. Now do the math again. Low pressure divided by high resistance equals low flow. We have successfully treated the number on the monitor, but we have catastrophically reduced the flow of fuel to the engine. The brain has a backup system for this, but even that system has a breaking point. It's called cerebral autoregulation. Your brain is smart. It has its own valves. If it senses blood pressure dropping, it dilates, opens its own blood vessels to let more blood in.
If pressure rises, it constricts them to protect itself. This keeps the blood flow steady, but only within a specific range. In a healthy young person, the brain can handle pressures all the way down to 60 or 70, but in a senior with years of high pressure, the brain has shifted its safety zone upwards. It gets used to high pressure. It needs high pressure. Its lower limit might be 110 systolic. If you drug a senior down to 100 or 110, they fall off the cerebral autoregulation cliff. The brain's vessels are fully open, screaming for blood, but the pressure is simply too weak to push the column of fluid up the neck and into the deep capillaries. The lights begin to dim. This doesn't cause a dramatic Hollywood-style stroke where you collapse and can't speak. It causes something far more insidious. It causes silent ischemia. Imagine a house where the voltage is just a little too low. The fridge still runs, but the lights flicker. The toaster takes twice as long. That is your brain on 120/80. And the first parts of the brain to shut down are the ones that are furthest away from the pump. We call these the watershed areas. And when they die, they leave behind a specific type of scar that doctors see every day, but rarely explain to their patients. Let's look at the MRI of a well-controlled hypertensive patient and see the physical evidence of this starvation.
Physical evidence of this starvation. If you look at the MRI scan of a senior citizen who has been aggressively treated for blood pressure over many years, you will often see something disturbing in the deep tissue of the brain. You see bright, white spots, like clouds, or like moth holes in a sweater. Radiologists call this leukoaraiosis. It translates literally to white matter rarefaction. It means the wiring of the brain, the insulation that connects your thoughts, is dissolving. Why does it happen here? Because these deep areas are the watershed zones. Think of a farm irrigation system. You have a central pump and long pipes stretching out to the fields. The plants right next to the pump always get plenty of water, but the plants at the very edge of the field, the ones at the end of the line, rely on the pressure being strong enough to reach them. If you turn down the pressure at the pump, the plants next to the nozzle are fine, but the plants at the edge wither and die. Your brain has watershed zones. They are the borderlands between the major arteries. They are the hardest places to reach. When you force an 80-year-old's pressure down to 120, the blood simply stops traveling that extra inch. The edges dry out. The neurons slowly starve. This does not look like Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's steals your memories. You forget your wife's name. This vascular starvation steals your executive function. You don't forget names. You forget how to plan. You get confused by your checkbook. You become apathetic. You move slower. Your thinking becomes muddy. Doctors often misdiagnose this as normal aging, or they call it vascular dementia. But in many cases, it is actually iatrogenic dementia, dementia caused by the treatment itself, caused by a pressure that was too low to feed the machine. And your body tries to warn you. It gives you a very specific signal that you are in the danger zone, but most patients and many doctors ignore it. It is orthostatic hypotension, the head rush. Here's the scenario. You are sitting on the couch, your blood is pooled in your legs. You stand up quickly to answer the phone. Gravity immediately pulls about half a liter of blood down towards your feet. Your brain's fuel tank suddenly empties. In a split second, biological sensors in your neck, called baroreceptors, should scream to your brain, pressure drop, accelerate the heart, clamp the veins, and instantly your heart should race and your vessels should tighten to push the blood back up to your head. But if you are on a beta blocker,
Your heart is chemically forbidden from racing. It cannot speed up. If you are on an alpha blocker, your vessels cannot tighten. The reflex is paralyzed. So you stand up. The blood falls. Gravity wins. Your vision goes black. You feel wobbly. You grab the sofa armrest. Maybe you recover in a few seconds. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you faint. And at 80 years old, a faint is not just a faint. A faint is a broken hip. And statistically, 50% of seniors who break a hip die within 12 months. This is the J curve in real life. We lowered the pressure to prevent a stroke that might happen in 5 years, and in doing so, we caused a fall that killed the patient in 5 months. This is the trade-off that nobody discusses. We are trading a theoretical long-term safety for an immediate short-term danger. And it is not just the brain that suffers when the pressure drops too low. There's another organ that relies entirely on pressure to do its job, an organ that acts as a filter. And there's a specific number, the bottom number, that acts as the limit. If you lower the diastolic pressure too much, you might be saving the arteries, but you are starving the heart muscle itself. We need to talk about the coronary perfusion gap. We need to talk about why a diastolic pressure below 70 might be a direct route to a heart attack.
Direct route to a heart attack. We obsess over the top number, the systolic pressure, the 120, the 140. That is the pumping pressure. But we often ignore the bottom number, the diastolic pressure, the 80, the 70. This is the pressure in your arteries when your heart is resting between beats. For your heart muscle, this resting phase is critical because the heart is a selfish organ. When it is squeezing, systole, it is working so hard that it crushes its own blood vessels. No blood can flow into the heart muscle itself while it is pumping. The heart only feeds itself when it relaxes. It relies on the back pressure in the aorta, the diastolic pressure, to push oxygen-rich blood into the coronary arteries. Now, imagine you have a senior patient with stiff arteries. Their top number is high, 160, but their bottom number is often normal or low, 70. This is called isolated systolic hypertension. The gap between the numbers is huge. The doctor sees the 160 and attacks it with heavy medication. The drugs bring the top number down to 130. Great, but drugs are blunt instruments. They lower everything, so the bottom number drops from 70 down to 55 or 50. This is the danger zone. At a pressure of 50, there isn't enough force to push blood into the coronary arteries. The heart muscle starts to starve. Paradoxically, by treating high blood pressure too aggressively, we can induce angina or even a heart attack. We are starving the engine to save the tires. And then there are the RINs, the kidneys. Your kidneys are essentially millions of tiny coffee filters. To push liquid through a dense filter, you need pressure. That is why espresso machines use 9 bars of pressure. Drip coffee uses gravity. If your renal arteries are stiff and clogged with age, your kidneys need higher pressure to push the toxins through the filter. If you drop the pressure too low, the filtration stops. The toxins back up into the blood. Your creatinine levels rise. The doctor says, "Oh, your kidneys are failing. It must be the high blood pressure damage." But often it is pre-renal azotemia. It is failure caused by low flow. If you slightly reduce the medication and let the pressure drift back up to 135 or 140, often the kidney function improves. The filter starts working again because the pressure is back. So we are trapped. Too high and we risk a hemorrhagic stroke, blowing a gasket. Too low and we risk silent brain damage, falls, heart starvation, and kidney failure. Where is the sweet spot? Where is the Goldilocks zone for an 80-year-old body? For decades, the guidelines were rigid. Lower is better. But in recent years, the science has cracked.
The data from the real world, not just controlled trials, has forced a change. New guidelines are emerging from Europe and from geriatric societies that are finally admitting we went too far. The new target is not 120. In fact, for many seniors, 120 is now considered a marker of frailty, not health. So what is the new number? And how do you safely navigate this with your own doctor? How do you de-prescribe without putting yourself in danger? Let's look at the new safety protocols and the rule of 140, and let's return to Mary to see how a simple adjustment gave her back her life.
Gave her back her life. The tide is turning in geriatric medicine. Recent guidelines from the European Society of Cardiology and the American College of Physicians have shifted the goalposts. For patients over 65 and especially over 80, the aggressive target of below 120 is being abandoned. The new safe zone for a healthy, active senior is between 130 and 140 systolic. And if you are over 80 or if you are frail, doctors are now accepting up to 150 as a reasonable target. Why? Because at 140, you maintain that critical perfusion pressure to the brain. You keep the kidneys filtering. You keep the heart fed. But you are still low enough to avoid the catastrophic blowout strokes that happen at 180 or 200. It is the balance between flow and safety. So, if you are watching this and checking your own numbers and you see 110 over 60 and you feel tired, what should you do? Rule number 1, never stop medication cold turkey. This causes rebound hypertension. Your body has upregulated its receptors to fight the drug. If you pull the drug away suddenly, the pressure can spike to dangerous levels instantly. Rule number 2, have the de-prescribing conversation. Take your logbook to your doctor, but do not just show the numbers, show the symptoms. Say, "Doctor, my pressure is perfect on paper, but I get dizzy when I stand up. I feel foggy. I'm afraid of falling." Symptoms trumps numbers. A good doctor treats the patient, not the spreadsheet. Ask about tapering. This means slowly reducing the dose, cutting a pill in half, monitoring for 2 weeks, then reducing again. It is a slow, careful landing. And rule number 3, support your arteries naturally. If you reduce the drugs, you still want to protect your vessels. You can do this by boosting nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas your body produces that relaxes the arteries. It turns the stiff pipes back into, well, slightly softer pipes. You can boost it with sunlight. UV rays on skin release nitric oxide. You can boost it with dietary nitrates, beets and arugula, and you can boost it with nasal breathing. Your sinuses produce nitric oxide. This is the natural way to lower pressure, not by poisoning the pump, but by opening the pipes. Let's go back to Mary. Her doctor listened. He didn't stop her pills, but he cut the dose in half. Her pressure drifted up from 115 to 138. To an insurance actuary, that looks like a failure. But to Mary, the dizziness vanished in 3 days. The fog lifted. She started cooking again. She didn't fall again. She lived another 10 years with a blood pressure of 140 over 80, and she lived those years fully awake. Medicine is not about achieving the lowest number possible. It is about achieving the highest quality of life possible. Do not let a number on a screen dictate your dignity. Protect your brain, respect your physiology, and give your blood the permission to flow. I am your senior doctor. Keep your pressure safe, not just low, and I will see you in the next investigation.